Day 11 of Operation Epic Fury. The encrypted command terminal inside the hardened bunker beneath northern Tehran flickered to life. The message was 3 words. It came from a man the world had known for less than 14 hours. Mujtaba Khamenei, Iran's newly anointed supreme leader, had just issued his first military order: activate Protocol Zulfar. This was not a missile launch, not yet. This was something far dangerous: the activation of a layered, pre-planned, multi-domain revenge architecture that Tehran had been building for exactly this contingency. The death of its father, the collapse of its command hierarchy, and the humiliation of its navy sunk at the bottom of the Indian Ocean. Protocol Zulfar was Iran's dead man's switch, and it had just been triggered by a 43-year-old with something to prove and nothing left to lose. 1,200 nautical miles away, in the Combat Information Center of the USS Gerald R. Ford, Senior Chief Petty Officer Dana Ashcraft was staring at a Spy-6 radar screen that was without warning beginning to fill with ghost contacts. Not 2 or 3, not even a dozen. At 03:19 hours, the Ford's Aegis Baseline 9 combat system registered 47 simultaneous airborne tracks erupting from Iran's southwestern coastline. Classification algorithms fired and reclassified. Classification fired again. The system's confidence threshold was hammering between 67% and 91%. The tracks were low, sea skimming altitudes between 8 and 40 meters, speeds consistent with Shahed 136 kamikaze drones and upgraded Noor anti-ship cruise missiles. 30 seconds later, a second eruption, this one from Yemen's Houthi-controlled coast in the south. 23 additional tracks, different launch vectors, designed to force the Carter's Sea Whiz and Ram missile systems to split their defensive intercept solutions and saturate the defensive bubble from 2 directions simultaneously. This was not improvised. This had been planned for months. What the Ford's combat crew did not yet know, and what the NSA's SIGINT intercept team in Bahrain had only just confirmed in the preceding 4 minutes, was that every one of those 70 inbound tracks had been precision cued with targeting data derived from Russian Resource P3 satellite imagery, downloaded to IRGC launch commanders less than 90 minutes prior. Russia had not pulled the trigger, but Russia had handed Iran the gun, loaded, cocked, and aimed. The Washington Post had reported it. Central Command had confirmed it, and now, at 03:19 hours, the consequences of that intelligence handshake were screaming across the Arabian Sea at Mach 0.85. Admiral Mark Cairns, aboard the Ford, had 6 minutes and 40 seconds before the first wave entered terminal acquisition range. He immediately executed 2 simultaneous orders. First, Emission Control Level 1. Every non-essential radar, every broadcasting antenna, every AIS transponder on every ship in the strike group went dark. The Ford disappeared electronically, replaced by 2 AN/SLQ-32V6 shipboard electronic warfare system decoys, broadcasting a supercharged false radar signature 14 nautical miles to the northeast, a digital ghost made to look hotter, bigger, and more convincing than 100,000 tons of nuclear steel. Second order, launch authorization, Section Charlie, for the Ford's FA-18F Super Hornets, armed with AIM-120D AMRAAMs and AGM-88G advanced anti-radiation guided missiles. The fighters were at Alert 5. They were wheels up in 94 seconds. At the same time, 3 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers in the strike group's outer ring, USS Bulkley, USS Truxtun, and USS Cole, repositioned at flank speed into a layered defense posture Alpha. Their Mk-41 VLS cells cycling through rapid-fire SM-6 launches, targeting the highest priority inbounds. The phased array radar of each destroyer was now communicating through the Ford's NIFC-CA Naval Integrated Fire Control Architecture. Every ship seeing what every other ship saw, the entire strike group operating as a single distributed weapon system. But the Iranians had planned for this too. At 03:21 hours, aboard Udeid Air Base in Qatar, where just hours earlier the Qatari government had elevated its national threat level to its highest tier, 22 additional Shahed 36 variants came in low from the northwest, their delta wings nearly invisible on ground-based radar. These were not targeting the Navy. These were going for Udeid's hardened aircraft shelters, specifically the bays housing the USAF's RQ-4 Global Hawk ISR platform and the B-1B Lancer bombers that had been flying round-the-clock strike packages over central Iran. Qatar's Patriot PAC-3 MSE batteries engaged immediately. 17 of the 22 were intercepted. 5 slipped through. 2 detonated on the ramp line. 1 pierced an unoccupied HAS. 2 were brought down by CWAS last resort systems 300 meters from the main terminal. The explosions lit up the Qatar sky in a fireball visible from downtown Doha. The base was not destroyed, but it was shaken. A message had been delivered. Nowhere in the Gulf was beyond reach. Back in the Arabian Sea, the NIFC-CA network was working. Of the 47 primary tracks inbound on the Ford, 38 were taken down by the outer SM-6 envelope. 6 more were destroyed by the intermediate RAM missile layer. 3 made it to CWAS terminal defense range. 2 were shredded. 1, a modified Qiyam al-Bar anti-ship missile, a weapon Iran had specifically upgraded after studying the failures of its newer variants, maneuvered in the final 800 meters, performing a pop-up dive terminal attack sequence that confused the Ford's close-in weapon system for 1.2 critical seconds. It detonated 40 meters off the starboard flight deck, close enough to spray the island structure with shrapnel, close enough to wound 4 sailors, close enough to temporarily take down one of the Ford's secondary radar arrays. Not a kill, but it was the closest Iran had come to drawing American blood at sea since the opening salvos of Operation Epic Fury 9 days prior. In Tehran's bunker, that near miss was interpreted as proof of concept. Protocol Zulfar was working. Mojtaba Khamenei's first act as supreme leader had drawn blood from the most powerful fleet on Earth. Iranian state media was already composing the broadcast, but they did not see what was already in the air. 2 EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft from VA-141 had been operating in Econ at 41,000 feet, 190 nautical miles south of the launch coordinates for the past 3 hours. They carried the latest NGJ-MB next-generation jammer mid-band pod, a system that could not just blind Iranian targeting radar, but actively inject false track data into Iran's launch command network. At 0327 hours, as the second wave of Houthi-curated tracks approached the Ford's outer engagement zone, both Growlers activated. What Iranian missile commanders saw on their screens was the Ford strike group accelerating northeast away from them at 35 knots, a phantom, an electronic lie. The second wave flew northeast, into empty ocean, into nothing. Simultaneously, at coordinates 26.4 degrees north, 56.3 degrees east in the Strait of Hormuz, two Virginia-class fast attack submarines, USS Minnesota and USS North Dakota, had been lurking since day 3 of Epic Fury. At 0331 hours, each fired 2 Tomahawk Block 5 maritime strike variants, their targeting packages already loaded with coordinates derived from KH-13 satellite overpass data collected 47 minutes earlier. The 4 missiles arrived at the IRGC coastal defense launch sites on Keshm Island at 0342 hours. The sites that had fired the first wave at 0317 hours were no longer operational. Their radar arrays, command trailers, and mobile launcher vehicles were reduced to smoldering craters visible on satellite imagery by 0395 hours.
The silence that followed was total. By 0400 hours, Mojtaba Khomeini's bunker communications had gone dark, severed by a classified cyber operation later attributed to NSA Tailored Access Operations and Unit 8200. Iran's state media broadcast was interrupted for 11 minutes. When it resumed, there was no mention of Protocol Zulfar, no mention of the response. Just a static image of the new Supreme Leader's portrait, music playing in the background, the unmistakable sound of a command structure scrambling to maintain the appearance of control over an operation that had just been systematically dismantled in 43 minutes. Admiral Cairn stood on the Ford's bridge as damage control teams finished their assessment of the shrapnel strike. 4 wounded, no fatalities. The radar array was back online in 19 minutes. Flight operations resumed at 0415. But this was not victory, not in any clean sense. Iran had proven it could absorb the death of its supreme leader and launch a coordinated multi-domain strike within 14 hours. It had demonstrated that Russian satellite intelligence converted a swarm of cheap drones into a precision targeting architecture that challenged even Aegis Baseline 9. It had forced the most powerful carrier strike group in the world to go dark, to hide, to spend down its SM-6 interceptor inventory that took months and billions to replenish. And Mojtaba Khomeini was still alive, still issuing orders, still inheriting a war machine that had not yet fired its deepest reserves. The Strait of Hormuz remained closed. Oil was approaching $120 a barrel. 11 American MQ-9 Reaper drones had been lost. 7 American service members were dead. And somewhere beneath the cold black water of the Indian Ocean, the crew of IRS Dina still lay at the bottom 40 nautical miles south of Gale. The next 72 hours would determine whether this conflict found a ceiling or whether Protocol Zulfar was merely the overture. What would you have done differently? With Iran's new supreme leader now battle-tested and Russia feeding live satellite intelligence into Iranian targeting systems, can the U.S. maintain dominance across 6 simultaneous theaters of operation? Comment your strategic analysis below. And if this breakdown exposed the true complexity of modern multi-domain warfare, hit like and subscribe, because the next classified file is already being unlocked.